The world does not listen through the headlines of Western newsrooms, but through the sound of alarm echoing from the very heart of the ancient continent. There are moments in history when a nation does not simply observe. It acts to smash the mirror that has reflected a distorted reality for decades. This past week, a decree was issued in Ouagadougou, not to repair, but to erase. Every political party in the nation has been officially dissolved, not suspended, not reformed, but dissolved into nothingness. Why now? Why Ibrahim Traoré? And why would a people who once possessed over 100 different political parties stand by and watch them all turn to ash overnight? The naked truth is this. For years, these organizations were not vessels for the people's will, but tools of corruption, division, and elite capture. When the foundation of a house is rotten, one does not repaint the walls. One must tear it down to build anew. The government declares that unity must come before politics, and sovereignty must be placed above a hollow pluralism. Do not look away. What comes next may change how we read the map. If you believe in these stories, give us your like, leave your thoughts, and subscribe to continue this journey together. It means more than numbers. It keeps the story alive. But history always whispers a warning. This is precisely how many stories of absolute power begin. We are witnessing a tension that cannot be ignored. Burkina Faso is no longer following the old playbook of dependent nations. Under the leadership of a young artillery captain, this nation is choosing a different path, nationalizing resources, rebuilding institutions, and asserting self-determination. The Burkinabe people are standing behind him, not because they worship an individual, but because they are exhausted by a democratic system that existed only on paper, while their blood was being spilled on the front lines. Look at the facts. Before this decree, Burkina Faso had more than 100 registered political parties. But how many of them truly served the people? How many existed only to serve foreign donors and urban elites while the rural heartlands bled under insecurity? Justice ceases to be justice when it becomes a weapon for the few. This dissolution is a necessary chemical reaction when public trust has completely evaporated. Yet, the great question remains. Is this the foundation of a new African political model, or merely the opening chapter of a very familiar authoritarian story? We are not here to cheer, nor are we here to condemn. Our task is to dismantle the truth. Burkina Faso is providing a real-time case study of what Africa has struggled with for decades. What comes after a broken democratic system, but before a just and accountable state is born? A nation in agony has no time for the endless debates of a political class detached from reality. When the enemy is at the gates, pluralism is often viewed as a luxury that a state under existential threat cannot afford. But remember, concentrated power is a double-edged sword. It can cut through chains, but it can also pierce the very hand that wields it. Will this centralization lead to salvation, or is it the dawn of an old darkness in a new form? The answer lies not in declarations, but in what will be built upon the ruins of the old world. History is a brutal cycle, and the ghosts of the 1960s are beginning to stir. History is not a straight line. It is a spiral that often returns to the same point of tension, demanding an answer to an old question. To understand the gravity of what is happening in Burkina Faso today, we must look back to 1964, to a moment that defined the modern African struggle for identity. That year, in a newly independent Ghana, the legendary Kwame Nkrumah made a decision that would haunt the continent's political architecture forever. He declared a one-party state, dissolving the opposition in the name of national unity and industrial survival. Nkrumah was not a tyrant by intent. He was a visionary who believed that a fragile, post-colonial state could not afford the luxury of Western-style division while trying to build dams, schools, and factories. He argued that multi-party politics were a colonial import designed to keep Africa weak and fragmented. Today, Ibrahim Traoré implicitly makes the same claim. He stands at the podium of history and suggests that 100 political parties did not bring security to the Sahel. They brought paralysis. They did not stop the insurgency. They fueled the fire of elite capture. If you value these deep dives into the mechanics of power, please take a moment to comment "Thank you" below. Your engagement tells the algorithm that independent African analysis deserves a seat at the global table. But history is a ruthless teacher. Once Nkrumah centralized power, the mechanisms of correction began to wither. What started as a shield for the state slowly transformed into a cage for dissent. When the executive becomes the sole arbiter of truth, the distance between unity and silence vanishes. In Ghana, this led to the Preventive Detention Act, a tool used to vanish critics without trial. The tragedy of the 1960s was not the lack of vision, but the lack of guardrails. Even the most brilliant architect cannot prevent a building from collapsing if they remove the structural supports that allow it to breathe. The parallel to Burkina Faso is striking, yet the context is even more perilous. Nkrumah operated within a strained parliamentary system. Traore is governing by decree in the absence of one. We must ask the uncomfortable question: can a revolutionary leader succeed where the fathers of Pan-Africanism faltered? Or are we witnessing the same structural fragility that eventually led to the coups of the past? In the 1960s, the world was divided by the Cold War. Today, the lines are blurred, but the pressure is identical. While Ibrahim Traoré rejects the old playbook, the international system watches with a predator's patience, waiting for the moment when temporary measures become permanent entrenchment. Sovereignty is a fire that can light a nation's path, but without institutional containment, it risks consuming the very house it was meant to warm. Is history repeating its mistakes, or is it finally correcting its course? The answer may lie in whether this generation has learned that a strong state is built on institutions, not just on the strength of a single man's will. To understand why the streets of Ouagadougou did not shake with protests against this decree, we must look at the source of power for the man who holds it. Ibrahim Traoré did not emerge from the velvet corridors of political academies, nor did he carry a resume approved by Western capitals. He emerged from the dust of forgotten outposts, from the trenches where young soldiers felt betrayed by the very elite running the country. His legitimacy was not built on the ballots of a decayed system, but on a brutal reality. The previous civilian government had failed to protect the lives of its own people. Traoré's rise represents a pivot of sovereignty, rarely seen in traditional African military takeovers. Instead of seeking patronage from the IMF or the World Bank to sustain the state apparatus, he chose the path of self-reliance. The decisions to nationalize resources, control strategic sectors, and reject aid-dependent development models are not merely political statements. They are hammer blows against the chains of neo-colonialism. To the Burkina youth, Traoré is not a politician. He is a rupture, a break from a submissive past toward a future where African gold must feed Africans. Before we reveal the next chapter, which is perhaps the most powerful assertion of sovereignty you will ever hear, I want to pause and speak directly to you. If this channel has moved you, if these stories are touching something deep in your spirit, then consider becoming a member, not for exclusive content or perks, but because supporting this channel is directly supporting narratives that mainstream media refuses to tell. Every membership is a vote for Banafrica Spotlight's mission. Every member becomes a co-creator of the revolution we are documenting. Join us. Stand with the principle that African wealth belongs to Africa. However, this is precisely where the tension reaches its peak. Revolutionary legitimacy is based on emotion and immediate results, while democratic legitimacy is based on enduring institutions. Emotion can ignite a revolution, but it cannot run a nation forever. By dissolving the parties, Traoré has cleared the chessboard, but he has also stripped away the natural pressure valves of a pluralistic society. Without parties to absorb dissatisfaction, every government failure, every economic dip or security lapse will fall directly onto the shoulders of a single individual. The question is not whether Ibrahim Traoré's intentions are sincere, but how long revolutionary legitimacy can replace democratic legitimacy. History has shown that leaders who receive absolute support in the beginning often struggle most when trust starts to erode. A system that only functions well when the leader is successful is a profoundly fragile system. Burkina Faso stands at the pivot point of destiny. Dismantling an old system is the easy part. Building a new architecture that can stand without the iron fist of a new individual is the true test. For if sovereignty is only maintained by personal strength, it will vanish the moment that individual leaves the historical stage. What happens when expectations are not met and there are no institutions strong enough to manage disappointment peacefully? That is the moment when soldiers begin to look behind their shoulders. The road to hell is often paved with good intentions, and in politics, those intentions frequently wear the face of urgency. When we look at the data from recent public sentiment, a shocking reality emerges. 85% of those surveyed support Ibrahim Traoré's decision to dissolve political parties. This is a number that cannot be ignored, but it is not merely support for an individual. It is a cry of desperation from a people exhausted by the hollow promises of formal democracy. However, we must pause to listen to the voices of those who have walked through the darkness before. A warning from the older generation, those who witnessed the era of Sani Abacha in Nigeria, reminds us that absolute power never stops of its own accord. It tends to expand until no one is left to ask questions. The difference between civilian rule and true democracy lies in independent institutions. Without an autonomous judiciary, an empowered parliament, and a fearless civil society, today's achievements can easily become tomorrow's chains. Take a second right here to tell us where you are watching from. Type the name of your city, your land, the soil beneath your feet. And as you do, know this. Benafrica Spotlight sends you not just thanks, but a blessing. For strength in your hands, for pride in your heart, for light on the road ahead. The comments below become a map of connection, showing that this message reaches far beyond borders. The price of political silence is the disappearance of correction mechanisms. When every decision is concentrated in a single office, mistakes are not identified until they become catastrophes. We saw this pattern repeat in Egypt after 2013, where emergency measures for the sake of stability became a permanent state of being, stifling all space for dialogue. A nation's dignity is built not only with infrastructure, but with the right of every citizen to voice dissent, without the fear of being branded a traitor. Traoré has declared that the old parties were tools of elite capture, and perhaps he is right. But the question remains, what will stop this new system from falling into that very same trap? Without guardrails, revolutionary zeal can easily transform into authoritarianism in the name of justice. Soldiers on the front lines can hold guns to protect the territory, but it is enduring institutions that protect the soul of a nation. The concentration of power may help Burkina Faso weather the current security storm, but it is also placing the nation in a life-or-death gamble. In politics, trust is a finite resource, and it will deplete rapidly if practical results are not accompanied by transparency and accountability. The next chapter of this story will not be decided by the most fervent supporters, but by how this system treats the smallest voices of criticism. For once peaceful exit paths are closed, history suggests only one way out: violence. History will not judge Ibrahim Traoré by the decrees he signed, but by what remains after he leaves the stage. Dismantling an obsolete system is the act of a soldier, but building a sustainable new one is the work of a great architect. Burkina Faso is currently in a political laboratory where the results of this experiment will shape the future of the entire Sahel and far beyond. For this revolution to avoid becoming another tragic cycle, 3 prerequisites must be met. First, there must be a clear roadmap to transition from personal power to the power of institutions. A nation is only truly free when the law is stronger than the ruler. Second, economic prosperity must be felt at the most basic level, in every bowl of rice, every home, and every job of ordinary citizens. And finally, there must be space for constructive dissent, because a society without an opposing voice is a society walking in the dark. What you have witnessed today is not a conclusion, but an opening. Africa's story of pride and independence is still being written, and each voice that joins makes the chorus stronger. Subscribe now, not as a favor, but as a commitment to follow this journey. Because the next video will not just continue the story, it may reshape how you see the world. Do not let this moment pass into silence. Subscribe to Banafrica Spotlight and stand ready for the chapter that comes after this one. The true challenge is not defeating the external enemy, but conquering the temptations of internal power. Ibrahim Traoré has proven that he has the vision to see a new Africa and the courage to challenge the old orders. But the ultimate test for him, and for the people of Burkina Faso, is whether they can build a future where sovereignty does not need to be traded for freedom, and where unity does not need to be maintained by silence. We are witnessing the rise of a new consciousness. This is not just the story of a small nation in West Africa. It is a story of human dignity and the hunger for self-determination. Regardless of the outcome, the world will have to view Africa through a completely different lens. Is this the final victory of an awakening continent, or just a brilliant spark before the night falls? The answer lies in the hands of those who are building, those who are hoping, and those who refuse to kneel. For in the end, history is not written by the winners, but by those who dare to believe they can change the world. Ibrahim Traoré. Ibrahim Traoré. Burkina Faso. Africa is rising, and this time, it will not be silenced.